Good morning, Gamecock fans. Today is Tuesday, July 8th, the year of our Lord 2025. This is Coffee with JC Shurburtt. Certainly happy that you guys have decided to join me this morning. Kind of feel sort of alone. I was doing the Chief Sports Network daily schedule on Instagram this morning. It's just me and Phil Kornblut and Sports Talk. I think they're still broadcasting this week. As I've said before, we'll be back with ITG on Monday. That's also the start of SEC Media Days. Gamecocks go in the morning, early, first right off the bat. Shane Beamer is my understanding. I know our Big Spur guys are going over Sunday night to Atlanta. And hopefully Atlanta becomes a place this year where Gamecock fans kind of pay attention to more frequently as far as maybe getting the SEC championship game, maybe getting in the playoff and the Peach Bowl, that kind of thing. So hopefully it's not the last time they play in Mercedes-Benz for a while when they play on August 31st against the Hokies. Good talk about the Hokies yesterday. We'll continue to kind of break that down. I'm sure we'll talk that game to death between now and the start of the season, but perhaps more pressing is a slew of recruiting decisions that could go a lot of different ways for the Gamecocks here in the coming weeks. Just to be honest, it's I've said a couple of times it's big boy recruiting. You're going to get in big boy battles. You're going to lose some. The idea is to win your share, and here we are, right now, starting tomorrow. And the tomorrow announcement, I think it's pretty safe to say he's probably not coming to Carolina. But tomorrow, Joel Combe from Marietta, Georgia, who visited way back when, had a really good visit. Carolina had a lead for a while. I've said a few times Tennessee's really good in Cobb County. Missouri's kind of snuck in there. I think it'll be one of those two schools. Tennessee's also on track for another Marietta prospect, a four-star linebacker. I like Combe a lot. He was a three-star guy, so that may not resonate as much with everybody, but I thought he was a physical player, a versatile defensive back, projected as a safety nickel at Carolina. So, hey, you don't get them all. That's what happens sometimes. And like I said, when Tennessee was kind of in the mix there, I was like, well, they do. I don't know what it is. They do very well in that part of Atlanta. Friday's a big day. We've talked about the state of North Carolina and how important it is for the Gamecocks to recruit well there. I think with Aiden and Andrew Harris and Noah Clark, they've done a fantastic job the last two cycles, really, because you have to remember Donovan Darden and Brian Rowe and Austin are all North Carolinians from the last class. You got some guys from the portal that were from North Carolina, like Jawarn Howell. So it's getting back there. I think that's an important state to recruit. If you're South Carolina, it's just been kind of an enigmatic process through the years. But Shane Beamer and his staff, they keep knocking at the door. Eventually, they're going to get players. But Friday is just a titanic recruiting day for the Gamecocks because Samari Matthews decides, as well as offensive tackle JB Shabbaz. Both of those are North Carolinians. Matthews, of course, you know about him. Smoke is his nickname. He's been on the Gamecocks radar for a long, long time. South Carolina's had, been at the top, the co-lead with Clemson. Texas is the other school. I haven't felt great about it in a couple of days, but I also will tell you that it's always gone back and forth. And the minute I think one way or the other with Matthews, I get new intel that says, oh, well, he may go this way. So we'll see. It is strictly a situation where, Texas is making a push. They've done this before. They did it with a D tackle out of Georgia at the end last year. I don't know what kind of statement they're trying to make. I think they probably fly over a bunch of very good defensive backs, but they really like Matthews, and I do too. I think he's a really good player, and could very well go to the Longhorns on Friday, but also could very well go to the Gamecocks. It's just going to take. It's just a decision he has to make. There's some things working in South Carolina's favor. There's some things working in Texas's favor. It's kind of up in the air, but certainly would be a big pickup if the Gamecocks landed him, and it would be sad in a way to lose him at the end. Just to be honest, you work a guy for that long, and Texas hasn't been involved with him all this time. But that's the way the cookie crumbles, folks. That's just how it is when you recruit players like this. The idea, again, is to get your share. South Carolina certainly has a small class, but it's a small but mighty group. A lot of blue chip players already with the 10 that they have. But certainly, when you talk about Samari Matthews, that's a guy that you always want, big time defensive back. You think of what Torian Gray can do with him, his length. They love him as a corner. Like I said, I've never bought the whole safety thing with him. There is that out there. Top 100 prospect, obviously. And right there at Huff High School, which is a place that has players just about every year. So Charlotte area standout. That would be a big one. And then Shabbaz, if you go on his public comments, I think South Carolina's in good shape. If you go on intel behind the scenes, it's been mixed recently. I thought that, from what I was told, fingers crossed was the quote I got about it. They're still working him. I don't know. At the end of the day, it's Tennessee, Ohio State, South Carolina. I know he loves or professes to love. How about that? The love profession. People say it's a lot like dating. It probably is. Recruiting, but professes to love the Gamecocks. He's had some really good I think every time he's visited, he's had a good go of it. But he's also an offensive tackle, folks. And I don't know if you read how Texas Tech finagled some sort of deal to get a 5-star offensive tackle for $5.1 million. I'm against that. I don't think you ever pay an offensive tackle out of high school that much. And it's because through the years, it's like playing roulette. It's a 50-50 proposition, no matter how much of a lock this guy is. And then you have situations too where guys are good out of high school, and then they come to college, and you're like, well, he could have done a little better in college. And then they go to the NFL, and they're what you thought they were. So you get no benefit out of that. And you've paid all this money. It's a developmental position. You really aren't supposed to get anything out of them until year 3. Josiah Thompson, obviously, is the exception to the rule. And he started every game but one last year when he was hurt for the Gamecocks as a true freshman. So, that does happen where you have an impact guy. But, what Miami did with the kid out of Missouri, and then what Texas Tech did with, Felix Ayoho? I just don't see it, man. That said, how does it relate to JB Shabbaz? I think it's because you talk about tackles, and he is a tackle. He may be a right tackle, but he's a tackle. 6'7", 295. That's how you draw them up. He's going to command a little bit more. Tennessee and Ohio State, how do they value him? If I'm Tennessee, I've got David Sanders sitting there as a true freshman, and I've got Faison Brandon, the top-rated quarterback out of Greensboro, which is right up there in his area. I'm selling that, and I'm trying to get another stud from North Carolina. And if they also get Kamari Blair, who the Gamecocks have been in on, we've talked about Blair and what kind of a high upside that guy has. His upside may be bigger than Shabbaz's, although Shabbaz is more highly rated. So, would it be Tennessee? Would it be Ohio State? I thought, again, you get back to JB's public comments. He's always kind of grouped Ohio State in there with the Gamecocks. So, heck, if Carolina loses them to Ohio State, they've lost one to Notre Dame in Adams. They lost a bunch to Michigan, this time around. Nobody yet to Penn State, but those schools, those Big Ten schools plus Notre Dame are problems up and down the eastern seaboard. And you're going to see that, folks, as South Carolina continues to try to work the whole north-south angle, selling the proximity of the SEC on the eastern seaboard, which I think is intelligent. I think it's a Mark Stoops going into Ohio at Kentucky on steroids because there's so many. I mean, Ohio's got a lot of really good players. Don't get me wrong. I call it the breadbasket of the Big Ten. When you look across the Big Ten, there's tons of Ohio guys on the roster. It's a big state population wise. It's a football mad state. And there's one school really, there's two Power Four schools because Cincinnati's in the Big 12 now, but it's really Ohio State and everybody else. I mean, you don't, it's like Georgia, they have it kind of to themselves. And Ohio State can't take everybody. Michigan can't take everybody. Those schools also recruit nationally. So there's a lot of good players. When you talk about North Carolina, Virginia, DC, Maryland, kind of just Maryland on down, Carolina does go into Pennsylvania and New Jersey and recruits from time to time as well. Those states have like infinitely more players combined than Ohio. And you also have, in addition to linemen, linemen are really good in Ohio, and you got linebackers, and there's more speed in Ohio than you would think, but you got a lot of speed and skill in the different pockets up and down the East Coast. Charlotte, Eastern North Carolina, the 757, Richmond, DC, Maryland. I mean, there's athletes. Boy, there definitely is. So, I think that's smart. But as Carolina continues to do that, I think you're going to see more battles with schools that aren't SEC brethren, but who are powerhouses nonetheless. And, frankly, right now, with the narrative that I feel is wrong, I feel like the narrative's wrong, just before anybody says anything. But there is a narrative out there that the Big Ten has surpassed the SEC, blah, blah, blah. These schools all have money. They also sell education and kind of try to beat up the SEC schools on that, which I think is ridiculous. But, that's the selling point for Michigan, Notre Dame, Penn State, Ohio State. And South Carolina is going to fight more battles year after year with those schools. The more the program continues to get better, and the more that they continue to make inroads in those states, and that includes North Carolina. Those schools dip down into North Carolina. Like I said before, 96 NFL draft picks the last 10 years compared to 49 for South Carolina. It's almost double. So there are players in North Carolina. It's kind of like a pool table. They just, scatter and go in different top pockets. Virginia is the same way. I mean, the Warren kid that was the big time tight end for Penn State last year was Virginia. So there's opportunity, but there's also competition. And South Carolina's won some battles. Dylan Stewart, Nick Harbor, Big Tree. And they've lost some, and that's just how it's going to go. But what you do when you kind of sift through everything at the end of the day is you have your, 10, 15 blue chip prospects that kind of function similarly to being in a loaded state, and a lot of those are South Carolina kids. And then you kind of fill in the gaps, so to speak, working north-south. I don't know if South Carolina will sign anybody from Georgia this cycle or not. However, they're not going to just not recruit Georgia moving forward. It's just one of those things that's worked out with the way the board's kind of set up this year, and having a shot at some other guys. But there's 20 plus players from Georgia on the roster. They continue to recruit very well in that state. I think they'll continue to look at Florida. They're not in Florida as much as Spurrier, and a little bit more than Muschamp. Muschamp didn't really, outside of a handful of guys, they weren't really into Florida. Spurrier was the guy that went into Florida probably because of his name and landed players. But Alabama seems to be a state that's in vogue this cycle. But my point to all this is that these Big Ten schools and Notre Dame, obviously, they're going to be a problem in recruiting, and you gotta win your share. And also, I'll add this: the Texas schools obviously are going to be a problem. Ask Clemson about that. They lost Perry Wright, the big D tackle out of a place, Gwinnett County in Georgia, that Clemson's done outstandingly well at through the years, and A&M got him. So how about that? And it's interesting because you start hearing things come out about the money with Texas and Texas A&M and all that. And we're supposed to be in revenue sharing, and Hugh Freeze had his ill-timed comments about, well, schools are working around the rev share already, and that's fine. That's going to happen. That happens. I think that it's a shame because I think some of these schools get very, very greedy and paranoid, and you know, they're always looking to see how they can beat the system. And then they're the first schools to sit there and blame everybody else when things don't go their way at times. I've seen this through the years. Hugh Freeze is right. I just don't think it was the right time to say that. Hugh hasn't had a winning season at Auburn yet. And they've lost a lot of recruits, and it's just not time to start bringing that up, in my opinion. But I think he's right, and it's interesting to see. It seems like with the consistent complaining and the consistent problems that coaches bring up and athletics directors bring up with NIL and the house settle and not the house settlement, NIL and the transfer portal, that they would be like, all right, we're going to just do it the way everybody else does it here for a few years and go from there. And maybe they are. Maybe they have some kind of approvable NIL deal that they can pay a little extra to. I just don't know. I mean, you're talking about, as we get into it, Texas and Texas A&M, a kid from Rock Hill, South Carolina, and a kid from Charlotte, North Carolina. Like I said, they fly over dozens of prospects, that are probably comparable, just to be honest, from their campuses. So I don't know what, I don't know what's going on with the Texas schools as far as how they're able to. I know they've got money, but how are they able to spend it is my question. And so I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, but we'll see what happens. So I mentioned Joel Combe is announcing tomorrow. Tennessee, Missouri, one of those two schools looks likely there. Shabbaz and Matthews are Friday. That's a big day for Carolina recruiting. If they can go 1 for 2, it's a good day. I think, in my opinion, gives you another North Carolina recruit. And if you go 2 for 2, it's going to be a good weekend, right? Happy weekend on that. And then the one that makes me nervous, next Monday, Tamarian Watkins from Northwestern High School in Rock Hill. The entire process, Gamecocks have had crystal ball predictions. Gamecocks have been the team to beat. And here comes Texas A&M. That's the other school. Well, there's some talk out there. And I think that our report on thebigspur.com the other day kind of laid it all out, that it's just up to him and his decision. I've heard from the start he wants to stay close to home, but how much money are we talking here? And I don't know. That was one I said on the show months ago, that who is the most important recruit to me, and I said Watkins, because you can't afford. I mean, you don't want to lose him. And I don't care that he's rated a 3-star or no star or whatever. I mean, he's a stud player. He's from Northwestern, Rock Hill. That's your backyard. That's where you need to get 95% of the big time prospects. You've already got Sequel Patterson lined up after he reclassified. You've got Xavier Currents. You've got Anthony Baxter. None of those guys go to Northwestern. They're at South Point and Indian Land, but that you got to kind of keep it together, and I want to be clear. If they do lose Watkins to Texas A&M, then, hey, look, I know I said that would be disappointing to me personally. That's my personal opinion. The class isn't going to fall apart. I just think it would be severely disappointing from my standpoint, because like in my mind, you're looking like, who can you absolutely not lose? And that kid's at the top of the list. And he's a stud too. I mean, he could be a linebacker, he could be a safety, he could be whatever. You know, I wouldn't be so quick to move him to linebacker. Uh, to just to be honest, because people try to do that with Nicky Manware as well, and we saw how that turned out. Maybe he will be, but I don't know. I think South Carolina, with their track record of big freaky guys like that, and then you got another one in Currents. If you can get those guys, those would be big pieces. But he's set to go next Monday. Woo, shoe buddy. All right, so the following Friday, and this should be good news. A lot of people are wondering why what took so long, for lack of a better term. Landon Duckworth will announce. I still think South Carolina's in really good shape there. Auburn got another quarterback. It's been kind of quiet since his official visit, but I think Carolina's trucking right along right there, and we'll see what happens. Um, what you don't want to do is go 0 for 3 heading into the Duckworth announcement. And well, I'm not saying that as far as the staff in the program. Um, the reaction to that is not going to be positive out here during a time where you want to have some good vibes in recruiting. I will remind everybody that last year July did not go all that well for South Carolina in recruiting. They ended up with a really good class at the end of the day. But so that's Duckworth, Watkins. You got Big Friday with Matthews and Shabbaz. Combe is going tomorrow. He's probably going to another school. And then Kosi Barnes, here's the situation with him. He's the 6'3" corner from Greensboro Grimsley. I think if they lose Matthews and or Watkins, you probably would see Barnes in the class. If they get everybody, it's going to be a judgment call, as far as will they take him or not, just because of numbers. But and that's my understanding of the situation. But he's on July 26th, so is that a Saturday? Yeah, that's Saturday, July 26th, right before practice starts. So he's another North Carolina kid. Pierre Dean and Julian Walker opted for Georgia and Michigan, respectively, last week. I, this has been reported. I talked to a couple of contacts the other day. And South Carolina's going to keep recruiting both those guys. And South Carolina did flip some guys last year. And, nowadays with the accelerated recruiting calendar, your season doesn't always mean, okay, we're going to go into the season and there's 10 guys that are uncommitted. If we have a big year, we're getting 8 of them. There's never 10 guys that are uncommitted that, you won't, unless you're scrambling. But there are guys that maybe commit elsewhere that you can flip. And Carolina flipped quite a few players last cycle down the stretch after having a good year. So the flip can still happen. I don't know. It's hard to flip players. 85% of players that make a commit end up signing with that school. Statistically, it doesn't happen as often as you think. You sort of look at it, and those guys get a lot of headlines, right? Because what we do is a player commits and we just kind of forget about them. Like we all forgot about Brian Rowe last year. Little did we know behind the scenes, there's a lot going on with him and other schools trying to flip him. But thankfully he stuck with it. And, we kind of forgot about him until he got to campus. And that's just human nature. And I can kind of appreciate the fact that we all kind of look forward. I think sometimes getting caught up in the past, especially when it comes to South Carolina football, is not all that smart. You always want to be looking forward, because if you dwell in the past too long, it'll drive you insane. There's a whole list of what might have been, that can kind of get you. Sometimes I'll bring those up and talk to them about them for discussion purposes, but I think it's better to focus on moving forward. So naturally, you're going to kind of, be interested in, the guys that are committed, but you're moving on to the next one. And are you, the major questions in recruiting are always going to be, how good is he and where's he going? It's that simple. Everything else, blah. because everything else you could possibly answer about recruits is based on answering those two questions logically and with as much accuracy as you possibly can bring to the table. So those are the questions. How good is he? Where's he going? How good can he be? Maybe a question, but how good is he? Where's he going? That's that simple with all that. But Pierre Dean and Julian Walker, are two guys that I think, you know, as far as the Gamecocks are concerned, it's not over. Like I said, it's 85%. They stick with the first one. So, obviously lean in that direction. But you never know. And this staff will just keep recruiting guys. I mean, Malik Clark was one last July that shocked everybody. And he just started showing up for games and was the worst kept secret in the world. And he finally flipped from Florida State back to the Gamecocks. So you just don't know. I mean, with regards to Michigan specifically, you don't know what's going to happen with that program. I mean, I don't know if any of you have been following it. Ohio State fans on X, and this doesn't mean anything because Clemson fans on X would be doing the same to South Carolina to them, Ole Miss to Mississippi State, blah, blah, blah. Rivalries are rivalries, Texas to Texas A&M. But, they're they're mad because they think Michigan should be on probation. They're probably frustrated they've lost 4 straight times to the Wolverines. The Connor Stallions thing, the show causes, all that good stuff. See, you never know what could happen in Michigan. But they got a really good staff, and I think that if Bryce Underwood can play well this year, they'll be pretty good, but maybe they won't be because they got a true freshman quarterback. They got to go to Oklahoma early. We'll see. Michigan got a lot of momentum last year, beating Ohio State and Alabama the last 2 games and to finish 8-5. But their staff can recruit. They got a lot to offer, that kind of thing. So we'll see how that turns out. I mean, you just never know. I mean, it's not like Michigan went 12-1 last year and made the playoff to come back from the national title. But so we'll see what happens with that. And then with Dean and Georgia, obviously that was a decision that came down to a judgment call at the end. It went back and forth, good old-fashioned signing day back and forth. Now, I will say this. Sometimes we assume if it's a really close call that the other school is still right there because it was close at decision time. And sometimes a player will make a decision, and then they're just kind of locked in. They're like, okay, that decision was hard. That's been made. It's over. I'm not really open to anything else. I'm not saying that's the case with Dean because obviously – there's folks that are like, hey, I don't know, maybe at the end you could flip him back or whatever. That talk is out there, but I'm just saying that pondering the what ifs here as far as that goes. Finally, I want to talk about the tight end board a little bit. Gamecocks want another tight end to go with Jamel House from Newberry, who's really, really good. In my opinion, that's a forgotten man. He committed very early. And I think that the guy that you can circle is Caden Ramsey from Cross. I talked to a couple of contacts around the state about him. They love the guy. They think the guy, they don't even know that he's necessarily a tight end. He's 6'5", 210. They think he could be a big receiver type. Big, athletic. I know Tilden Riley is going to Vanderbilt from Orangeburg Prep, and then Ramsey got the offer. I think South Carolina should be in pretty good shape with him. Just a really good all-around football player from a small school in South Carolina. Cross, home of Rodriguez Wilson, former Gamecock, played in the NFL linebacker, was an assistant coach at South Carolina for a minute. Cross High School, that's one of those places where every few years, or maybe more than a few, you'll have a player and he's really, really good and kind of under the radar because it's a small school in the state. And he put up big numbers. He's one of the best players on that team. And the size and athleticism and the upside. Yeah, he's the type of guy I think, Carolina, if they get him, and I expect them to, let's just say I expect them to be a formidable challenge for his services. If they get him, this guy ends up redshirting, and then in a couple of years, where'd he come from? It's that type of upside. Don't expect him to be ranked high. Don't expect him to be, a blue chip, quote unquote, but he's the type of South Carolina prospect that the Gamecocks have really made a lot of. Well, let's use a South Carolina analogy. A lot of barbecue hash with through the years, right? We're making hash. Put it on the rice, right? So I'm, based on that feedback I got over the Fourth of July weekend, I'm excited about the possibilities there with Caden Ramsey. But that's just kind of like my whole weird Tamarian Watkins thing. That's just my weird. I've been doing this for so long. What matters to me probably matters less to y'all, and vice versa. As far as all this goes, but this is the type of guy I'm like, yeah, this is a making hash. Let's use that, the making hash thing. So there you have it. Hale McGranahan on the BigSpur.com had a predictions article up for VIP members. They had the VIP room up last night. He and Whittle. You can join by using the code the show 50, half off an annual membership, or if you'd like, you can pay full price monthly or annually. It's $9.95, or actually it's $12.95 now if you're not a current member. If you are a current member and you don't cancel, then your price stays the same, but CBS and Paramount raised new member prices. So it's $12.95 a month, but you get Paramount Plus for free with it. And so you can watch all the Taylor Sheridan stuff and all the good stuff on Paramount Plus. March Madness, I think, all that good stuff on that particular app. And the wife may, or your significant other, or your husband, or whoever may want Paramount Plus as part of it. And that way you can justify the expense. But you can use also, if you aren't quite ready to make the full commitment and want to use the code the show 50, half off an annual is a pretty sweet deal as well. That comes out to about $6.25 a month for that. Don't forget, SEC Sunday Night comes back on Sunday night with a preview of SEC Media Days, streaming that live on the Chief Sports app, also on X and our other places we stream live. And then Inside the Gamecock Super Stream returns Monday for that first day of SEC Media Days. It's going to be busy with Shane Beamer going, and we'll discuss everything in depth. And all that stuff. So stay logged on to the BigSpur.com as well, for those of you that are members, for all the latest in recruiting in the coming days. So JC Shurburtt here with coffee, signing off. I'm out. Holla.